She wasn't allowed in the barn until her husband died. What she found inside changed everything. The last frost and an empty chair. She had never opened that door, not once in 15 years. Even on the days when the wind howled down the hills and rattled every shutter of their farmhouse, that one door remained still. The barn, her husband's sanctuary, or perhaps his fortress. Now he was gone. Claire pulled the shawl tighter around her shoulders, stepping onto the porch. The morning air was sharper than it should have been for early spring. A late frost had settled in overnight, curling the edges of new leaves and turning the dew into delicate shards of ice. She stood there barefoot, numb to the cold, staring across the field at the barn. The door was ajar, not wide open, just slightly. Enough for a shadow to slip through, enough to suggest that someone or something had disturbed it. Claire didn't remember leaving it like that. She swallowed, her throat dry despite the damp air. For a moment, she felt like a trespasser in her own home. That barn had always been Mark's domain. When they first bought the property, she imagined it would be the place where they stored hay, maybe house a horse or two. But Mark had claimed it from the start. He locked it, reinforced the hinges, installed a second deadbolt. Whenever she asked, he'd smile that half smile of his and say, "That old thing? Just my workshop, Claire. Too messy for you." She stopped asking after the first year. It had been 40 days since Mark's funeral. 40 days since she stood in the church cemetery, gripping the handle of her umbrella as the rain soaked her black coat and blurred the priest's words. Her friends had urged her to sell the place. "Start fresh," they said. "Come back to the city." But Claire couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She had buried a man, yes, but she'd also buried a version of herself. The woman who believed that love, loyalty, and shared dreams were enough. That version of Claire had withered quietly over the years, smothered beneath silent dinners and half-finished conversations. Now, all she had were questions. And that door. She didn't go to the barn immediately. Instead, she brewed a pot of coffee and watched the sun rise through the kitchen window, waiting for the courage to settle in her bones. The kitchen was too clean. It always was. She used to bake every Saturday. Mark liked blueberry muffins, still warm, with butter that melted as soon as it touched them. She hadn't made them since his health started to fade. Mark had died quietly. A heart attack, the doctors said. In his sleep. She remembered how peaceful he looked. Almost too peaceful. Like someone who had finally set down a heavy burden. Was that what the barn had been? By mid-morning, Claire put on her boots and stepped outside. The air was warmer now, but the frost still glittered in the shadows. The grass crunched under her feet as she walked across the field. The barn loomed ahead, aged wood, silvered by time and storms. Ivy crawled up one side. The padlock hung loosely from the latch. Her breath caught as she reached the threshold. Inside, the air was cooler, laced with the scent of old wood, oil, and something else, something metallic. It took a moment for her eyes to adjust. She expected clutter, cobwebs, perhaps tools hanging from the walls. Instead, she found order, a workbench meticulously arranged, cabinets labeled with faded masking tape, wires, resistors, photos. Photos? Claire stepped forward, her boots echoing on the concrete floor. On the far wall, rows of shelves stretched to the ceiling, filled with boxes, each one marked with a date. March 2007, May 2009, August 2013. She pulled down one of the boxes. Inside, she found envelopes. Dozens of them. Some yellowed, some crisp, all addressed in Mark's handwriting, but they weren't addressed to her. They were addressed to E.S. Who was E.S.? Claire sat down on the stool by the workbench. Her hands trembled as she opened the first envelope. The paper crackled. April 3rd, 2007. Dear E. Today she asked about the barn again. I told her the usual. It's just a workshop. I hate lying to her. But what choice do I have? I'm trying to protect her. Protect you. Claire blinked. Protect me? Protect who? She opened another. November 12th, 2009. I saw him again today. He has your eyes. God, it nearly stopped my heart. He doesn't know, of course, he can't. But sometimes I think he senses it. She dropped the letter. Was Mark talking about a child? She pulled open drawer after drawer. Notes, journals, sketches, old newspaper clippings, maps, coordinates, medical reports. What the hell had her husband been hiding? She spent hours there. Each paper unfolded a new layer of a man she never truly knew. Mark had been kind, quiet, dependable. But here, within these walls, he was someone else. Obsessive, precise, passionate. One journal entry caught her eye. "I wish I could tell her everything, but she'd never forgive me. I broke a promise the day I met E again. I thought I could stay away. I was wrong." The air in the barn grew heavy. Claire leaned against the wall, overwhelmed. Was it an affair? Had Mark been unfaithful all these years? No, it didn't read like that. There was guilt, yes, but also longing, regret, hope, and always ES. She took one box back to the house. She needed time to process, to make sense of it all. That night she couldn't sleep. She heard the wind rustling the ivy outside. The owl that nested in the rafters of the barn hooted once, then fell silent. Mark's handwriting danced in her mind. The fragments of his double life taunted her. The next morning she drove to the post office. "I need to track a name," she told the clerk. "Someone named ES from this area, going back at least a decade." The woman behind the counter frowned. "That's a little vague." "Please," Claire said, her voice catching. "It's important." It would be days before she got an answer. In the meantime, she kept returning to the barn. Each visit unveiled something new. An old photograph, a blueprint, a half-finished device with wires and blinking lights. Mark had been building something. But what? And why? Claire wasn't sure what she feared more, that she'd never uncover the full truth, or that she would, and it would change everything she thought she knew about the man she loved. The key that didn't belong. The sky that morning had a dull silver hue, neither promising rain nor offering warmth. Evelyn stood by the kitchen window, clutching a warm mug of black coffee between her trembling hands. The steam curled upward like silent ghosts, disappearing into nothing. Her gaze drifted out toward the barn again, the same barn her husband Paul had forbidden her from entering their entire marriage. For 12 years, she had honored that unspoken rule. Paul wasn't a man of many boundaries, but the barn, that was sacred. He never raised his voice at Evelyn, but the one time, just once, she asked about it, he didn't shout. He just looked at her with a sadness so deep, so final, she never brought it up again. And now, he was gone, buried under the willow tree by the hill, exactly where he wanted to be. She'd honored every wish. Every detail of the funeral had been arranged as he had described in the journal they'd written together during his cancer's final stretch. But the barn, his barn, was never mentioned. No instructions, no parting words, no letter hidden away in a drawer. Evelyn took a sip of coffee, then walked over to the drawer by the back door, the one where Paul always tossed random keys, screws, old nails, and crumpled receipts. It was a junk drawer in every sense, chaotic, overflowing. She dug her fingers in, rummaging through the clutter until her hand brushed against something cold and smooth. A key. It was unlike the others. Brass, polished, with a strange floral emblem engraved on the handle. She had never seen this one before, not in the last 12 years, and yet it felt intentional, purposeful, like it had waited there quietly for her to find. Her fingers tightened around it. She didn't hesitate. Coffee still in hand, she slipped on her cardigan and stepped out into the crisp autumn morning. The barn loomed ahead, standing still like an old sentinel guarding forgotten truths. As she approached, memories pulsed through her, Paul's laughter echoing from the yard, the warm embrace after hard days, the quiet way he would disappear into that building at sunset and emerge only after dark, smelling faintly of old wood and something she could never quite place. The padlock was still there, untouched. Evelyn slid the key into the lock. It clicked open with a fluidity that startled her. The door creaked as she pushed it open, the rusty hinges groaning like a reluctant confessor being asked to speak. Dust swirled in the morning light that poured in through the cracks in the wooden walls. The air was thick, ripe with the scent of hay, metal, and something else, something older. The inside wasn't what she had expected. There were no tools, no farming equipment, no shelves of oil cans or tractor parts like she had imagined all these years. Instead, there was an order, a system, a quiet elegance in the arrangement of things. To the right, a long wooden workbench covered in antique-looking books, leather-bound with yellowed pages. Nearby, glass jars filled with preserved herbs and labeled in Paul's handwriting. To the left, an old armchair, blankets, a kettle, a shelf of journals, and, in the center, a covered easel. Evelyn froze. Paul never painted, or at least, she never thought he did. With slow, deliberate steps, she approached the easel. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached out and removed the cloth. Underneath was a painting. It wasn't particularly beautiful in an artistic sense, but it was deeply moving. The painting depicted a woman standing in a sunflower field, facing away from the viewer, her long brown hair braided down her back, and in her arms, a child. The woman looked like her. No, it was her. But the child... Tears burned at the back of Evelyn's eyes before she could stop them, because the child in the painting had Paul's eyes, and she had never borne children. Her breath caught. The journals. She turned to the shelf, pulling down the topmost one and flipping it open. Inside, Paul's looping cursive greeted her with the date, April 12th, 7 years ago. I saw her again today. That woman, the one from New Haven. I don't know why I followed her. I think maybe I was hoping to forget. But when I saw the boy holding her hand, I couldn't. He looked like me. God help me, he looked exactly like me. Evelyn sat down slowly, the weight of the journal pressing against her chest. The next entry. I never told Evelyn. I wanted to, 1,000 times. But how do you tell the love of your life that there's someone out there, someone you don't even fully understand, who claims their son is yours? Another entry. She sent me a photo. His name is Jacob. He's 5. He plays piano. Says he wants to be a train conductor. Evelyn would have loved him. But I can't bring that into her life, not when we've already lost so much. Evelyn clutched the journal, her mind reeling. She remembered now, the business trips Paul had taken to New Haven, the long weekends away, always returning with an unspoken weariness, a subtle guilt behind his smile. She had trusted him. And now, in this barn, she was beginning to understand why it had always been off limits. It wasn't shame, it was pain, and perhaps fear. As she stood to explore more, her eye caught a small envelope tucked between 2 books. Her name, in Paul's handwriting. Shaking, she opened it. Inside was a letter. My Evelyn, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you've found the key I could never give you while I was alive. There are things in this barn that were never meant to hurt you, but they are part of me, of us. I never cheated on you in the way you fear. The child wasn't conceived during our marriage. It happened before I even met you. One night, a mistake, a silence that grew too big to speak. When she came back into my life, I was already yours. But Jacob, he was part of me. And I tried, in my own way, to keep him close without tearing apart what we had. I funded his schooling. I visited twice a year. That's all she allowed. You were always the heart of my life, Evie. You gave me joy I never thought I deserved. I wanted to tell you, but I also wanted to protect you from the truth. If you choose to walk away from this barn and never open another page, I will understand. But if your heart is strong enough, I hope you'll read Jacob's letters. He wrote them for me. I kept them here. I didn't have the courage to read them all. Maybe you will. Love always, Paul. The paper slipped from her fingers. The world spun gently. A child. His child. A boy named Jacob. Somewhere out there was a piece of Paul. And maybe, just maybe, a piece of her future. The sun had climbed higher in the sky now, piercing through the barn slats, painting golden stripes on the floor. Evelyn stood in the light, letting it warm her face as she reached for the small wooden box beside the chair labeled Jacob's Letters. She opened it. Inside were dozens of envelopes, each one carefully preserved. On the back of each was a drawing, a piano, a train, a stick figure of Dad. In one, a heart with 3 figures, a boy, a man, and a woman with long hair. Her. Even though Jacob had never met her, Paul had clearly spoken of her. Evelyn read the first letter, hands trembling. Dear Dad, I hope you're feeling better. Mommy said you were tired. I played piano today. I made a song for you. Maybe one day I'll play it for you and the lady you told me about, the one who loves books and drinks too much tea. She sounds nice. I drew her in this letter. Love, Jacob. Evelyn wept, but this time, not from pain, from something else, something new, something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. She didn't know what would come next, what Jacob would be like, or if she even had a place in his life. But suddenly, she felt her purpose shift. Paul was gone, but his story wasn't over, and neither was hers. Letters from a boy I never knew. It was the fourth morning since Evelyn had first stepped into the barn, the place her late husband had locked away from her for all those years. Each day since, she had found herself pulled back to it. Not out of fear anymore, but something else, something deeper. A sense that this wasn't just about grief or secrets, it was about purpose. That morning, the sky wore a soft blue robe. Dew still clung to the petals in her garden. Birds chirped without a care, as if the world hadn't shifted. But Evelyn's world had changed. It had tilted slightly, quietly, in a way only she could feel. The box of letters still sat where she left it, tucked into a dusty wooden chest beneath a pile of old blankets. The handwriting was unmistakably Jacob's. She had only read one so far, and even that had left her shaken to the core, not because of what it said, but because of how it made her feel. It was tender. It was young. It was the voice of a man she never knew, or thought she didn't. With trembling hands, Evelyn sat cross-legged on the floor of the barn, opened the chest, and pulled out the next letter. It was dated 18 years ago, long before she and Jacob had even met, before the farmhouse, before the dream they built. The letter read, "Dear Daniel, I don't know where you are, and I don't even know if these letters will ever reach you, but I write them anyway, because if I don't, I think I'll forget who I am." Today, I passed the boy in the hallway again. His hands were shaking. I think he misses his mother, the way he stared at the phone like it might ring if he stared hard enough. Sometimes, I feel like that boy. It's been 3 years since I made that promise. I won't forget. I won't walk away. I hope you're still drawing. Yours, Jay. Evelyn read the letter once, then twice. Daniel? Who was Daniel? And what promise had Jacob made? She looked through the box. Each letter was addressed to this mysterious Daniel, each one more emotionally raw than the last. There were doodles in the margins, one of a boat, one of a kite, one of a small hand reaching for a larger one. Evelyn began reading them all. She couldn't stop. Hours passed. Outside, the sun rose higher. Chickens clucked in the distance. Somewhere far away, a tractor hummed. But Evelyn was not in the present anymore. She was in the past. She was walking alongside a young man, the man who would become her husband. But this version of him was someone she had never seen. Jacob, the dreamer. Jacob, the caregiver. Jacob, the father. The idea struck her hard. And for a moment, Evelyn felt as if the breath had been knocked from her. No, he never had children. She had asked him, early in their relationship. He had said no, gently, but firmly. And he had looked away when he said it. That memory flooded back now. She picked up another letter. Dear Daniel, you turned 10 today. I watched the sun rise thinking about the day I met you. You had dirt on your face and fire in your eyes. You didn't trust anyone, and you had every right not to. The world had failed you too many times. I failed you too. I'm sorry for not being stronger back then. I was just a kid myself, trying to be brave for someone else, trying to make a home out of a broken system. But I never stopped caring, not once. If you're reading this one day, I want you to know, I never stopped loving you either. Happy birthday, kiddo. Jacob. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. She had to know more. What was this broken system he was talking about? Foster care, adoption, a group home? Suddenly, she remembered the hidden drawer in Jacob's desk, the one he kept locked in his office. She had never dared open it. But now she felt like she had to. Leaving the barn with a handful of letters, Evelyn walked back into the farmhouse. Her heart beat with urgency. She pulled open the desk drawer, the lock still firm. But Evelyn had grown up with 4 brothers. Locks didn't scare her. She fetched a thin screwdriver from the kitchen junk drawer and jimmied the lock. It popped open with a soft click. Inside, more letters, more journals, and a photograph. A boy, around 9 or 10, skinny, dark hair, smiling, but not fully, standing beside a younger Jacob. Evelyn gasped. On the back, written in Jacob's handwriting, Me and D, summer 2006. Daniel was real, and Jacob had been a foster father. But why had he never told her? And where was Daniel now? Evelyn pressed the photo to her chest, then whispered into the silence, I'll find him. I promise. Outside, a wind rustled through the trees. It felt like the beginning of something, something sacred, something true, the second key and the first lie. It was close to midnight when Clara sat back in her kitchen, eyes swollen from tears she hadn't realized had been falling. On the table in front of her was the red leather journal, open to the last entry Jacob had written. His words still echoed in her mind. "I'll tell her. One day, when I find the courage. Or when I have no other choice." But Jacob never told her, and now he never would. Clara knew the journal wasn't just a private diary. It was a breadcrumb trail, fragments of a life she never got to see. And something inside her whispered that this was only the beginning. She glanced at the barn key again, and now a second key, smaller, brass, older, had fallen from between the journal's pages when she flipped through it earlier. It had a small tag attached to it with a faint letter P scratched into the metal. She held it in her palm, letting its cold truth settle into her thoughts. P, she murmured. P for what? She tried to recall if Jacob had any lockers, boxes, or rooms that could match it. Then suddenly it hit her. The piano. It had been untouched for years, pushed into the corner of their quiet living room. Jacob had insisted on keeping it. A family heirloom, he'd said. But Clara had always felt like there was something he wasn't saying about it. She stood, walked softly across the hall, and sat in front of the old upright piano. It had dust on the lid and a silence that felt sacred. She reached toward the narrow, carved compartment just beneath the music stand, something she'd never once tried to open before. The key slid in with a delicate click, and then the compartment gave way. Inside was a velvet-lined wooden box. When Clara opened it, she gasped, not from fear, but recognition. A stack of aged letters, each tied with a ribbon. They were addressed to "My dearest E," not C, not Clara, E. She felt her chest tighten. With trembling hands, she unfolded the first letter. "Elena, I dreamed of you again last night. We were by the lake just like before I left. I could hear your laugh, and even in my dreams it still undoes me." Clara blinked. Elena? The name meant nothing to her. But the depth of the writing, the tenderness, that voice on paper, it was Jacob. Every word screamed of him. But these weren't new letters. The dates on them spanned over a decade. The earliest one, dated the year before Jacob and Clara had met. She read another. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. And I hate that I'm pretending this life I built is enough. It isn't. Not without you. But I couldn't stay in that town, not after what happened, not after—" Clara stopped. Her heart was thudding. What had happened? She wasn't angry. Not yet. What she felt was something far more hollow. Confusion. Curiosity, dressed in mourning clothes. She read on, even as a storm began to rumble softly outside, as if the world itself was bracing for the rest of the story. One letter described a child, a baby. "She has your eyes, Elena, and when she smiles, it's like the sun rises twice. But I only got to hold her once. They told me I didn't have rights, that it was over, that I should forget. How can I forget her?" A child? Clara sat frozen. She and Jacob had never had children. It had been the wound neither of them dared reopen. Infertility had painted so much silence in their marriage, but Jacob had a daughter? And then it got worse. "I tried to visit her once. Just once. I watched her from the other side of the school fence. She was wearing a green backpack. She looked up and smiled. She didn't know who I was. But I knew her. I'll always know her." Clara placed the letter down. Her hands were cold. Her husband hadn't just had a past. He'd had a family, a daughter. A woman named Elena he had loved so deeply that even death hadn't fully buried it. And Clara had known none of it. She returned the letters to the box, her breath shallow, her thoughts racing. "Who are you, Jacob?" she whispered into the dim silence. And that's when she remembered. The barn, Jacob's sanctuary, the one place she was never allowed in, the place that now felt more like a vault than a workspace. If this was what he hid inside a piano, what did he bury in the barn? That night, Clara didn't sleep. She sat in the living room chair, journal and key in hand, waiting for dawn. When morning broke through the trees, lighting up the fields in a quiet golden hush, Clara walked out barefoot toward the barn. The dew kissed her ankles, and the air smelled like something between grief and possibility. She inserted the key. The heavy wooden doors creaked, and slowly opened. Dust particles danced in the early light, swirling around the scent of aged wood, oil, and hay. Tools hung neatly along the walls. Old machines, jars, and crates lined the shelves. But what drew Clara's eye wasn't any of that. It was the tarp-covered structure at the far end. It looked like a workbench, maybe, or a cabinet. She stepped forward, her feet soft on the wood floor. She tugged the edge of the tarp and pulled. Underneath was a meticulously built cradle. Not an ordinary one. A handmade, intricate piece with carvings along the railings, stars, birds, flowers. Clara ran her hand over the wood, breath catching in her throat. Jacob built this. For the baby he never got to raise? Clara wanted to scream, to cry, but she couldn't. Instead, she sat on the small bench beside the cradle and noticed something tucked beneath it. A photograph. Worn edges. A woman with soft eyes, holding a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Clara turned it over. In Jacob's handwriting, Lily, 2007. Lily. That was her name. Clara didn't know where this journey was taking her, but she knew, with every beat of her aching heart, she had to find this child. Because if Jacob was too afraid to face his past, then maybe she could. Maybe that would be the way to forgive him. Maybe that's how healing truly begins. Not when the secrets are buried, but when someone has the courage to uncover them. Lily's eyes. The photograph stayed in Clara's hand all morning. She barely noticed the way the sunlight shifted across the room, or how the coffee she'd brewed sat untouched. All she saw were Lily's eyes. Soft, curious, a little mischievous. Eyes that, she suddenly realized, looked just like Jacob's. Her throat tightened. Jacob had a daughter, not just a secret from his past, a living, breathing person, somewhere out there. And somehow, she didn't feel betrayed anymore. Not exactly. What she felt was a sudden, aching need to know more, to find Lily, to understand why Jacob never told her. She placed the photo gently on the table and opened the journal again, flipping quickly through the pages until she saw a name. Lily. The entry was dated 2015, nearly a decade ago. I saw her again today, just from afar, near the library. She's grown so much, taller than Elena now. I wanted to say something, anything, but I didn't. I couldn't. It's not my place anymore. I chose silence. I chose Clara. Clara stared at those final words. I chose Clara. She closed the journal and leaned back, eyes stinging. Was it supposed to comfort her, knowing Jacob had loved her, even after giving up a child? Or did it make it worse? No. She stood up. Whatever this feeling was, she couldn't just sit with it. She had to do something. She opened her laptop, typed Lily 2007 and Elena and Jacob Reynolds into every search field she could think of. Hours passed. Nothing. She tried local schools, old newspaper archives, even social media. But there were too many Lilies, too many Elenas, and too many ghosts. But then, in a parenting forum archived from 2009, she found a thread titled Single Moms Raising Girls with Heart Conditions. One post stood out. User, eRose89. It's been 2 years since her surgery. She's doing better, but I still wake up wondering how long until the next emergency. Some days I feel strong. Others I feel like I'm barely holding it together. Clara's breath caught. Heart condition? She clicked into the profile. There wasn't much, just a screen name. A location tag, Maplewood County, NY, Maplewood. That was less than 2 hours away. She scrolled back to the barn photo again. In the background, just beyond the porch, was a green mailbox. On the side, Elena Rose, Maplewood. Her hands trembled as she picked up the phone. She didn't know what she would say, but she dialed anyway. The number connected. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then a soft voice answered. Hello? Clara froze. Her mind spun. What am I doing? She was about to hang up when the voice spoke again. Hello? Is anyone there? Hi, Clara blurted. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to sell anything. I found something, and I think I need to talk to you about Jacob Reynolds. Silence. Dead, heavy silence. Then, who is this? My name is Clara. she said quietly. I was Jacob's wife. Another silence, then a long, drawn-out sigh. I was wondering when you'd find me. Clara's knees buckled and she sat back down. You knew about me? She asked. I knew he was married. He told me. Eventually, Elena replied. And Lily? She doesn't know. Not about him. Not really. Does she... Clara hesitated. Does she know he's... gone? No. I think she deserves to know. Another pause, then a whisper. So do I. They arranged to meet that weekend. A public place, neutral ground, a quiet coffee shop just off the main road in Maplewood. Clara couldn't sleep the night before. Her dreams were filled with half-formed images. Jacob's eyes, a little girl's laughter, the creak of the barn door opening again. And then morning came. She dressed carefully, not to impress, but to be honest, present, human. The coffee shop was quiet. She spotted Elena immediately. She looked older than in the photo, of course, tired, but elegant. There was a kind of guarded gentleness in the way she held her cup, like someone who had learned how to protect herself. They nodded at each other, sat down. Neither spoke at first. Then Elena said, He built a cradle, didn't he? Clara's breath caught. Yes. He always said he would, if things had been different. I found it, in the barn. Elena smiled, sad. Of course you did. I didn't know, Clara said. I swear. I didn't know about any of it. The letters, the child, you. I believe you, Elena said. Then Clara asked the question that had haunted her since that night in the barn. Why didn't he try harder to be in Lily's life? Elena looked out the window. He did, in his own way. But after the custody fight, after I remarried, it got messy. He thought he'd only confuse her, hurt her. He thought it was too late. Maybe it was. Clara felt tears rising again. But she's his daughter. And yours now too, if you want her to be. Clara froze. What do you mean? Elena reached into her purse and took out a small envelope. She slid it across the table. Inside was a photo, a current one. Lily, now 17, stood in front of a high school theater backdrop, wearing a costume, smiling. Behind her, a banner read, The Sound of Music, Spring Production. She's in her senior year, Elena said. Wants to study drama. She's a good kid. She's never needed to know everything. But if you think it would help her understand her father, if you think you can tell her better than I can, I'll let you. Clara stared at the picture. Lily looked just like Jacob, but there was something more, a light, a strength, a voice, and Clara knew what she had to do. When Lily learned the truth. It took Clara 3 days to find the right words. 3 long, sleepless nights of rehearsing in her head how to explain to a 17-year-old girl that the man she'd never known had loved her all along, that he had built her a cradle, written her letters, left behind a barn full of quiet devotion. How do you tell a stranger that they were wanted, missed, chosen, even in silence? On the 4th day, Clara called Elena again. She deserves to know the truth, Clara said. Not a version of it, not a safe version, but everything. Elena hesitated. Then she agreed. And that's how Clara found herself driving back to Maplewood on a rainy Sunday afternoon, gripping a folder filled with Jacob's old letters and a single photo of the cradle. The wind howled as she parked outside Elena's modest home. It was a white cottage with ivy crawling up one side, the kind of house that felt lived in. Safe. Human. Lily answered the door. She was taller than Clara expected. Shoulder-length curls, a splash of freckles across her nose. There was a wary curiosity in her eyes. Hi, Clara said gently. I'm Clara. I know, Lily replied. You were married to Jacob. Clara's heart skipped. She nodded. Is it okay if we talk? They sat in the small living room. Elena brought tea but stayed in the kitchen, giving them space. Lily folded her arms, cautious but not cold. So, what do you want to tell me? Clara took a deep breath. Jacob was your father. Lily didn't blink. I figured, she said after a moment. Mom always got weird when I asked about him, and I overheard a few things. Plus, I Googled. Clara half laughed. Of course you did. But what I don't get, Lily said slowly, is why he never came back, called, wrote, nothing. Clara reached into her bag, pulled out the letters, the journal, the photo of the cradle. She placed them one by one on the coffee table between them. He did, she whispered. He just didn't send them. Lily stared at the pile. What is all this? His journal, Clara said. His letters to you, things he kept, things he built. He locked them away in a barn I wasn't even allowed into, until he died. I found them after. And I need you to know, he never forgot you. Lily's fingers trembled as she reached for the first envelope. The handwriting was neat, slanted, familiar, though she'd never seen it before. She opened one letter. Dear Lily, I saw you at the spring concert. You didn't know I was there. You were incredible. You smiled when the spotlight hit you like the whole world was yours. And it is, even if I can't be in it. I'm sorry. I want you to know that first. I'm sorry for not being the father I should have been. But I never stopped thinking about you, not once. You are, and always will be, the brightest thing I ever helped create. I love you. Always. Dad. Lily dropped the letter in her lap. Tears spilled freely now. She didn't bother wiping them away. Clara waited. Minutes passed. Then Lily asked, Why didn't he send these? Clara's voice shook. Because he thought maybe it would hurt more. That maybe he'd already lost the right. He didn't, Lily whispered. He didn't. I know, Clara said. And I think he knew too. Just too late. They sat together in silence for a while. Then Lily said something Clara never expected. Can I see it? Clara blinked. See what? The barn, Lily said. And the cradle, if that's okay. Clara nodded, tears brimming again. Of course it is. They arrived just before sunset. The farm was quiet. The grass was soaked from the afternoon rain and the sky hung low with lavender clouds. Clara led Lily toward the barn. I haven't moved anything, she said. It's all exactly how he left it. She unlocked the door. It creaked open, just like before, and Lily stepped into the space where her father had loved her in silence for 17 years. She walked slowly, touching the corners of the workbench, tracing the outlines of the cradle with her fingertips. She stopped when she saw a small hand-painted sign on the wall. Clara hadn't noticed it before. It said, in Jacob's handwriting, for LR, someday. Lily ran her fingers over the letters. I thought I didn't matter to him, she whispered. All my life. I thought I was the unwanted one. Clara stepped beside her. You were never unwanted, she said. You were just unspoken, but always loved. Lily nodded. Then she turned to Clara. Can I come back sometimes? Clara smiled. This place is yours as much as it is mine. Lily looked around again. I think I'd like to repaint the barn one day. Make it brighter. Make it mine. I'd like that, Clara said. They stood side by side, two women bound by the love of one man, by loss, by truth, and by something unexpected, a second chance. Outside, the last rays of sun stretched across the field, and in the barn, Lily picked up her father's journal. She would read it all, every page, every line, and when she was done, she would write a few pages of her own, the voice she never heard. Until now. The next morning, Clara made breakfast for two. She had done it out of habit, 2 cups of tea, 2 plates of toast, before remembering that Lily had gone back home late the night before. Still, she left 1 plate out, just in case. And as if the universe were listening, the phone rang. It was Elena. She didn't sleep, Elena said softly. She stayed up reading the letters, all of them. There was a pause. She asked me something this morning I never thought I'd hear. Clara waited. She asked if I had any recordings of his voice, anything, even an old voicemail. Clara's heart clenched. There were none. She had deleted the last voice messages out of grief. That day he didn't come home. She'd needed to erase everything, just to breathe. But then something hit her. She hadn't checked the barn. Jacob had kept everything in there. Letters, journals, even the tiny music box he once tried to fix for a neighbor's child. He was methodical, sentimental. Maybe he left something more. Clara grabbed her coat, and for the first time since Lily had visited, she stepped into the barn with a different purpose. Not to mourn, but to search. She started with the cabinet under the workbench. There were papers, an old toolbox, a dusty thermos, a faded photograph of the farm covered in snow. Nothing unusual. Then she spotted it. A black cassette tape. No label. Just a date. October 3rd. She didn't remember anything special about that day, but it was in Jacob's handwriting. She took it carefully, as though it might break under her fingers. There was an old cassette player still mounted on the shelf, covered in cobwebs. Clara cleaned it with the sleeve of her jacket, slipped the tape in, and hit play. The whir of the reels began. A pause, some static, and then a voice. "Hi. I don't know where to start. I guess, if you're hearing this, something happened. Or maybe I got brave enough to share this. Or maybe Clara found it. Either way, this is for Lily." Clara froze. Her hands trembled. The voice was raw, a little shaky, but unmistakably Jacob's. She closed her eyes. He continued. "You were 5 the last time I saw you up close. You had on this purple hoodie with a unicorn horn and you laughed when your shoelaces kept coming undone." Clara smiled through her tears. She could picture it. "I remember thinking, how can a person so small make the whole world stop like that?" He paused. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for your first steps, your birthdays, the time you won that poetry contest. I read about it in the paper. You were 11. He chuckled. "Even your name, Lily Rose, that was the name I wanted, and your mom picked it, not knowing I'd written it down years before in a notebook. Maybe fate is kinder than we think." Another long pause. "I hope, if you're older now, you've found something you love. Music, stories, art, whatever it is, keep it close, even when the world feels heavy. I wasn't the best man. I made mistakes, big ones, but I need you to know something." Clara braced herself. "I loved you. From the moment I saw your heartbeat on that fuzzy black and white screen in the clinic, I loved you. And I never stopped." Static filled the room. Then the tape clicked to an end. Clara sat in silence, Jacob's voice still echoing inside her like a lullaby long overdue. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed the tape, rushed home, and called Elena. "She needs to hear this," Clara said. "Tonight." That evening, Lily sat in the barn once more. The wind outside had picked up. The trees rustled like whispers of the past. Clara placed the tape recorder between them. "It's his voice," she said. Lily stared at the device. She hadn't heard his voice since ever. Elena stepped back, giving her space. Lily reached out and pressed play. And just like that, he was there. Not just in words, or wood, or ink, but in breath, in tone, in pauses, in warmth. She heard her father speak to her, really speak to her, and something inside her broke, but not in the painful way. This was the kind of breaking that healed as it shattered. Tears streamed down Lily's cheeks, silent but steady. She listened to every word, twice, then again. After the third time, she turned to Clara. "Did he know how much I wanted to hear that?" Clara placed a hand on her shoulder. "I think he knew more than he ever said." Lily picked up the tape, held it like a fragile bird. "I want to record something back," she said. Clara blinked. "Now?" Lily nodded. "I want to tell him something, even if it's too late." Clara brought an old digital recorder from the house. She handed it over gently. Lily pressed record, and for the first time the daughter spoke to the father she never got to meet. "Hi, Dad," she began, her voice shaking. "I don't know what to say, except thank you. For loving me in silence. For building a cradle you never got to see me sleep in. For watching my concerts, even if I didn't see you in the crowd." She paused, swallowing emotion. "I forgive you. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I do. I forgive you for leaving, and I'll carry you with me from now on. In my music, in my smile, in every note I ever sing." She stopped the recording, tears still wet on her cheeks, and she smiled. Not because the sadness was gone, but because it had finally made room for peace. Later that night, after Lily had left, Clara stood alone in the barn once more. She looked around, the tools, the books, the cradle, the journals, and the voice, Jacob's voice, preserved forever, like the soft scent of cedar in the wood. She whispered into the air, as if he were listening. She's not angry anymore, Clara said. She's growing. She's strong. Then she added, and maybe, so am I. For the first time in months, she felt warmth return to her chest. The kind of warmth that says, it's okay to live again, it's okay to hope. And outside the barn, in the quiet dark of the farm, the stars began to blink, one by one, like tiny lanterns cheering her on. The barn was never just a barn. It was mid-October when Lily returned to the farmhouse. The trees had already started turning gold, and the barn stood quietly in the misty morning, as if waiting for her. She wasn't the same girl who had arrived months ago, eyes guarded, heart closed. Now she walked with a quiet steadiness. She had slept better. Her voice during rehearsals was stronger, and though the ache of absence still lived inside her, it had softened into something she could carry with grace. Clara was in the garden, picking herbs when Lily approached. "Mind if I stay for a few days?" Lily asked. Clara wiped her hands on her apron, smiling. "I was hoping you would." That evening, they cooked together. The kitchen filled with the smell of rosemary and garlic, and their laughter rose like music above the clatter of pots and pans. At one point, Lily paused and looked around the space. "I used to wonder what kind of man my father was." Clara looked at her, waiting. "But now, I think I understand. He was scared, but he loved deeply, even if he didn't know how to show it." Clara nodded, eyes glassy. "He loved you both. That barn, it held his guilt, yes, but it also held his hope." Lily leaned against the table, thoughtful. "I'd like to do something with it." Clara raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I want to turn it into a place for healing," Lily said. "For music, for memory, for others who've lost someone and don't know where to put the ache." Clara felt her chest tighten. She had spent so long grieving within those walls. She never imagined it could become something more, something alive. "He would have liked that," she said softly. Over the next weeks, they worked together. They cleared the back wall, sanded the floors, and cleaned the windows that Jacob had once nailed shut. Clara even found an old string of lights Jacob had meant to hang, but never did. Lily put them up herself. They named the space the Lantern Room. On the opening day, people came from the village and beyond. Some brought instruments, others brought poems. Many simply came to listen. And when Lily stepped onto the small wooden platform they had built, barefoot, holding her guitar, a hush fell over the room. She looked out at the crowd, at Clara, at Jacob's photo on the mantel. Then she said, "This isn't a performance, it's a letter." She strummed once, and the note hung in the air like breath before snow. Then she began to sing. It wasn't a sad song, not anymore. It was a song about loss, yes, but also about finding the pieces that still matter, about turning silence into symphony. Her voice wove through the beams of the barn like a thread mending old fabric. Some people cried, some closed their eyes, some held the hand of the person beside them. And Clara? She just watched. Her husband's barn, once a space of secrets, was now filled with stories, light, and life. After the final note, the room stayed quiet for a moment, as if no one wanted to break the spell. Then applause broke out, not loud, not thunderous, but warm, grateful, human. Later that night, Lily sat outside under the stars. Clara joined her with 2 cups of tea. "Do you remember," Lily said, "when I asked you if the barn had always been locked?" Clara nodded. "You said he kept it that way for a reason, but maybe the reason wasn't fear. Maybe he was saving it." "For what?" Clara asked. Lily looked up at the sky. "For this." They sat in silence for a while. Then Clara whispered, "You know, you've changed." Lily turned to her. "How so?" "You're not carrying the weight anymore. You've turned it into wings." Lily smiled, tears in her eyes. "So have you." Back in the barn, the string lights flickered gently, casting golden shadows on the walls. The cradle Jacob built stood in the corner, not empty, but holding a collection of letters and photos from others who had come to the Lantern Room to share their stories. It had become a cradle for grief, and for hope. The next morning, Lily packed her things. She would return soon, but for now, her life called her elsewhere. As she hugged Clara goodbye, she handed her a small envelope. "Don't open it yet," she said. "Wait until sunset." Clara nodded, curious. That evening, she sat on the porch, the envelope in her lap. The sky blushed orange, then deepened into indigo. Finally, she opened it. Inside was a note. It read, "Dear Clara, you gave me a home I never expected, a truth I never thought I could hold, and a mother's heart, even when you didn't have to. I found my father, but I also found you. Love, Lily." Clara wept, not with sadness, but with something else, something rare, something whole. She stood, looked toward the barn, now bathed in soft evening light, and whispered, "Thank you, Jacob, for everything, even the pain." From far away, a single bird soared across the sky, and in the barn, a quiet melody played from the old cassette deck. The voice she had once thought was gone, now lived on, in song, in wood, in a daughter's courage, and in a love that never truly left. What was once a locked barn full of secrets had become a sanctuary for second chances. And maybe that's what grief is too, a locked door, waiting for someone brave enough to find the key.